Look, that's up to the voters. I think it was a great debate for airing the issues that have come up through the campaign and outlining the pretty sharp choice that voters have over the next 2 or 3 days, because there are different versions about where New Zealand can go. And we believe, as I laid out tonight, we can build on the economic strength, deal with some of these long-running issues. We've got a great opportunity to do that. And Labor's, the discussion about tax will slow the economy, stall it, and make it harder to do all those things.
Do you really believe everyone agrees that there's an $11.7 billion hole in Labor's fiscals?
Everyone agrees as a whole. They can argue about the size of it. That's the best estimate. And I have to say that in my experience as a finance minister, the idea that Labor can run budgets where there's no new money for police pay increases, for more social workers, for vulnerable children, nothing new for conservation for 2 or 3 years. We did that. That's ridiculous. We did that, something like that, once in the bottom of a recession. There's no need to do it now, but they've ended up in this position because they've got a hole in their budget. So when we've got surpluses in a growing economy, they're talking about running some hardline austerity for about 1/3 of what the government does, and that makes no sense.
But
I think everyone agrees,
when you're not prepared to name a single person. Neither yourself or Stephen Joyce have named a single person, so who is everyone?
Well, they all agree there's a hole in the budget. You can argue, well, you look at the commentators and economists, but I can tell you from my experience, you can't run a government budget where for 1/3 of the government expenditure that includes police pay rises, vulnerable children, the conservation budget, and go for 2 or 3 years with no increases. Their numbers just don't add up. And it doesn't make sense. Here we are in a situation where hard-won surpluses, everyone's worked hard to get here, we're one of the few countries with surpluses, and Labor are now proposing a plan that includes higher taxes and more debt when we have surpluses, and there's no reason to do that.
I think what everyone's trying to ask is that the operating allowance line that Labor says they meant to say spare cash, that didn't add up to, what, 9.4 billion, which was the biggest part of the $11.7 billion plan. Do you now accept that 9.4 billion, you just added it up cumulatively when it shouldn't have been? Do you accept that that number was wrong?
No, as the Labor leader said in the debate, they had something like 2.6 billion over 3 years. Well, that's just nothing like enough.
But
if you came to run the government.
You said there was an $11 billion hole, and there isn't an $11 billion hole.
Well, as we've explained right from the start, that's our estimate of the hole. Others agree that there is a hole. Some would say it's smaller. They have pointed out that it would be, quote, very challenging to run budgets where for 1/3 of government activity that includes, as I said, our prisons, our police, all the people there who need pay rises, the Department of Conservation, vulnerable children, that's an organisation with 5,000 employees who will be looking for pay equity, will be looking for more resources, and they should have it, that somehow Labor are going to run 2 or 3 years of budgets with no new cash for those things. And I can tell you from my experience as a finance minister, that is simply not credible. But worse than that, it's not necessary when we've got surpluses.
But you say everyone, but you still can't point to someone who agrees with you apart from Stephen Joyce.
As I said, everyone who's looked at it agrees there's a hole there. They've argued.
Who is everyone?
They can argue about the size of it. And I'm describing to you the alternatives. Either there's a hole, or you believe that Labor will run zero budgets across about 1/3 of government services for 2 to 3 years. That's what they now say they will do. That is simply not credible.
So apart from you and Stephen Joyce, who is arguing about the size of the hole?
Well, the commentators have all made comments at different stages.
Can you name one?
Well, if you look at what Cameron Baggery said about it, he said, yes, it would be challenging. And I think more of them, if they've gone and had a look at it. And I have to tell you, the commentators have never done a budget. I've done 8. I managed New Zealand's budget from the biggest deficits it's ever had through to now one of the more significant surpluses in the developed world. Actually, I back myself against commentators who've never done it. And what I'm telling you is it's not credible for Labor to say that they're going to put all their money into health and education and they'll run the rest of the budget with zero budgets for 2 to 3 years. Effectively what they're doing is saying they're going to put up taxes, take money off people on the average wage so they can pay for more expensive tertiary education. That's sort of the net effect of the whole thing, and leave a big hole for the police, for for conservation, for vulnerable children.
On income tax, do you accept that you were being disingenuous?
No, I don't. It's absolutely clear that on the 1st of April, people on the average wage will pay more income tax if Labor is elected than if National is elected. If National is elected, their income tax will reduce by $1,000 a year. If Labor is, and that's in legislation, if Labor is elected, they will have to pass legislation in the House to raise the amount of tax that people on the average wage will pay from the 1st of April. They'll have to take the active step to pass legislation to raise the amount of tax. Now, if you're paying $1,000 more under Labor than under National, we call that an increase in tax.
But you accept that it would be the same.
Nothing,
It's
because
in
nobody's
people's
received
pockets,
anything
isn't it?
yet.
Isn't that just spin? It's not a rise because it's not in people's pockets.
Well,
Isn't
so if
it
it's
just
not,
spin?
you can use the words however you like. If you're paying
That's what you're
more
doing, though.
tax under Labor than under National, then that is higher tax.
But how can you
Accept
say it's
that.
raising it when nobody's receiving it yet?
It's legislated. It's supported
But nobody's
by a
receiving it.
significant majority.
Technicality.
It's significant majority of the House. Well, look, I don't think anyone disagrees with this. If National is elected, then the law will continue, and people on the average wage will pay $1,000 a year less tax. If Labor is elected, and this is an opinion, this is what will have to happen, they will have to pass legislation, get a majority in the House to increase the tax on people on the average wage from 1 April.
Just on residential property and free trade agreements, can you ever see a new free trade agreement under a national-led government that might include an exclusion for residential property? So to allow for non-resident foreign buyers to not buy property in New Zealand?
No, we're not planning that.
And what if
we've got a number of free trade agreements, in fact more than any governments had before, which we want to advance for the benefit of our export community and our regions and the strength of the economy, and we think that's an overriding objective.
And none of the new ones or none of the renegotiated ones would include a clause like that?
No, we're not planning that.
What if when-
we for each one we prepare a mandate, as for the European Free Trade Agreement, for the TPP 11, the remaining countries in the Asia Pacific, the agreement for the region, but we haven't included those in the mandate.
What if Winston Peters asks for one?
Well, that's a matter that would sort out after the election. Our position's pretty clear.
Has it got to a point where you're trying to talk to him now before the election, given these polls?
No, we're focusing absolutely on what New Zealand needs, which is on the 25th of September, clarity about government, raising our support so that we can have a strong national-led government, because that is what will continue the economic momentum and allow us to get on with the job of dealing with these issues that have been raised during the election campaign, which we're in a great position to take forward, whether it's environmental standards or cracking our most difficult social problems.
And the polls also show that you could go with the
Winston
Greens.
choose you
Could you be phoning, the polls show that you could form a government with the Greens. Would you be phoning James Shaw on election night just to check in whether they might change their position?
Well, I think James will first want to clear up the confusion that's been created.
No, but
tonight
would you consider giving him a call?
Well, as I said, he'll be first wanting to clear up the confusion about what the Labor leader meant when she said her word was her bond and Greens would be first cab off the rank. That seems to be under question now. The Greens have always ruled themselves out of dealing with National, so we haven't had to rule them out.
So
If you're
How
still in
confident
government,
are you
if you're
that,
still in government on
that
Tuesday,
New Zealand First would choose National over Labor?
Look, politicians presented with a situation by the voters that required us to negotiate with New Zealand First. As politicians, we'd understand that obligation, as I said in the debate, which would be, New Zealanders have a strong expectation of stable, clear government. And if the voters give us a proportion of the vote that require negotiation around that, then of course we would undertake that obligation, and I'm sure that Winston Peters would.
Do you
If
feel
you're
more
still in
comfortable
government
about
on-
that
if you're still in
relationship
government on Tuesday,
with
would-
New Zealand First, given that today he came out and said water taxes is off the table, we don't need charge water bottlers? Does that give you more confidence in an arrangement with them?
Look, Mr Peters has made all sorts of statements about policy, and I think a post-election negotiation would sort out which ones were really important. I think he has come under a lot of pressure in the regions where he's found that rather than the picture he painted of the regions all being in trouble, in fact, They're keen to see the ongoing migration to get people to do the jobs that need to be done. They're opposed to all Labor's taxes, which would have quite an impact on the regional production sector. So he's trying to deal with that, and you know, who knows what that would mean after an election.
If you're still in government on Tuesday, will your government appeal the most recent Tēnā Pora court ruling?
Oh, look, I couldn't comment on that, and we wouldn't be in a position to make that decision on Tuesday.
Well, you have to
anyway.
make the decision by Tuesday.
Well, look, I'd have to take advice on it, but you know, in general, we would respect the decisions of the courts and deal with it.
So you
as
won't
far
be
as I
appealing
understand
then?
it, well, as far look, I can't make a commitment on it simply because in this period before the election, we're not trying to make government decisions. Any decision after the election would be simply about retaining the position so that an incoming government could make the final decision, because that's what would be appropriate.
Your ministers have put out plenty of press releases, though.
Sorry, well,
Your ministers have continued to make government decisions. They keep putting out ministerial press releases every day.
well, they've put out some press releases about some government decisions. I'd accept that, but that would be flowing on from cabinet decisions made some time ago. This would be a new cabinet decision, and we're not in a position to do that just right now.
Thank you.